Now that I've covered why I digitize film the way I do and have walked through the steps to do so, it's time to turn your scanned negatives into photographs. I use a program called Negative Lab Pro. It lives inside Adobe Lightroom Classic and gives you a lot of control when making your conversions. The intent behind originally capturing your negatives as negatives is to have the most control over converting them into those positives. So you can use this method if you camera scanned or flatbed scan your negatives. Let's talk about it. First, a little why before we get into the how. Jump to this time in the video if you want to skip to the tutorial. Film negatives have their characteristics and idiosyncrasies that make it difficult for a one-and-done solution when it comes to converting them. Different film stocks have color casts as part of the plastic substrate they're built on. There can be chemical shifts in the dyes used to render color as film ages, and how those negatives were chemically developed can be inconsistent depending on where you've had them processed. Negative Lab Pro addresses these variations and strives to give you consistent results. Negative Lab Pro integrates directly into Adobe Lightroom Classic, so you get to work non-destructively on your negatives, meaning you can always adjust and fine-tune the conversion later without losing the original scan, just like with a raw workflow with digital photography. Because it has built-in profiles and settings that emulate the look of different film, you can easily dial in and refine the tonality and color rendering, and both the look of the original film stock or adjust it to your taste. Okay, it's time to get converting. And now here we are in the develop module. And what we're going to do is we're going to single click on any one of these images here. It doesn't matter which one down in the film strip. We're going to select all. And the next thing we need to do is make sure that autosync is selected. That's very important because the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the eyedropper and white balance everything. So Negative Lab Pro is going to take the color of the images and convert it based on characteristics that it sees within the image. So we want to neutralize the film stock or the color cast of the film stock. So as you can see, everything kind of changed in the film strip there when I did that. And that's exactly what we want. So the next thing we're going to do is crop, and we're going to select the crop tool. And because this is a 35 millimeter film, it was shot on a 35 millimeter camera, and I want everything to stay that ratio. So that's a 2:3 or 4:6 ratio. We're going to select that, and everything is going to change here accordingly. And we want to bring the edges in a bit. We don't want to crop right down to the image area at this point because every image is going to be a little different. You know, when I scan the images, they're not exactly in the same spot every time. They might be a little left, a little right, etc. So I don't want to go too tightly at this point. I just want to go kind of roughly, so it'll make things a little bit easier. This is rotated a little bit, so I'm just going to apply a tiny rotation and make this first one square and just sort of hope that I've made everything equally square as I go through them. So at this point, we hit the return key, and that applies the crop. Now I want to click auto sync off at this point because I only want things to apply one at a time. So I'm actually going to deselect, and then I'm going to go one at a time. So here we are. This first image selected. I'm going to go to the crop tool again, and now I'm going to go one by one and bring the edges of the crop mask down to the edges of the image itself. And I'm going to go one by one. And it's going to be tedious going through an entire roll to do this. And I'm not going to subject you to my changing the entire roll, but I do want to show you a few images so you can see what that looks like. Sometimes you have a little sliver here left over. It's, you know, because this is in Lightroom and it's non-destructive editing, you can go back to it at any time, including after you've converted in Negative Lab Pro, and you might see some masking there that you didn't intend to originally be there. And that's common. I see that all the time. And bring those in, bring these corners in a tiny bit. This image here, now everything was horizontal when I brought it in because that's the way I scanned everything using the Veloy EZ35. I had rotated everything, or I had rotated a couple images that I shot vertically. So that's what's going on here. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring in the corners, maybe bring in the bottom a tiny bit. There we go. And I'm going to do this again for this vertical image right here. Bring that down a touch like so. And we're back to some horizontal images. So we're just going to bring that in. So as you can see, things were in a different spot. There was the difference here was a little bit different in prior frames than there is in this one. So that's totally normal and completely expected. So still a little bit here. Now you have to decide if you want to maintain the 2:3 ratio, the 4:6 ratio, whether you want to crop the tiny sliver off the top or the bottom as you do this. And that's something that's subjective and you can figure out on your own. Now, if you need to crop this frame in the future to either better center or compose around the subject or straighten horizon lines, that's something that's subjective and up to you. So if you like your compositions to be exactly as you shot them, or if you prefer to adjust the crop to your taste, that's completely your call to make. So as I said, I'm not going to subject you to my cropping every single image. So I'm going to move on to the next section right about now. Now that I've cropped the entire film strip, I'm going to invoke Negative Lab Pro and turn these negatives into positives. And you can do this in either the library module or the develop module. But since I was already in develop, I'm just going to stay here. Now, if you have a series of images or a series of frames that were shot under the same conditions and with the same exposure, you can select all of those and do this all at once or go one at a time. And I like to go one at a time. It's just the way I prefer to work. So to invoke Negative Lab Pro, you go up to, in Lightroom, the File pull-down menu, come down to Plugin Extras, and go to Negative Lab Pro. This floating window comes up, and you are ready to start converting. Here we are in Negative Lab Pro. The first tab that's going to show by default is Convert. And now we're going to go through these different options. And source is going to be how you captured your negative, how the negative was digitized. So in my case, it's digital camera. I use the Veloy EZ35. Sometimes I use the EZ120. So it's digital camera for me. If you flatbed scanned your negatives using either the ViewScan or Silverfast programs with your scanner, this would be the option for you. TIFF scan is something I'm not really sure what that is, and it's something I haven't needed to use in my travel, so I just sort of ignore that for now. But digital camera is the way I captured my images, so that's what I choose here. Now, color mode. You can experiment to see which option you prefer. Frontier and Nuritsu emulate those types of negative scanners, and I prefer Frontier for the most part, but as you're going through this and playing around with it, I encourage you to try different methods and see what works best for you. Now, if you scan black and white film, you simply choose black and white and you're ready to go. But because this is a color image, I'm going to go back to Frontier and go from there. Pre-saturation, I leave alone. I leave that at the default. Border buffer, I also leave at 0%. That's something that's designed to crop down to the image area if you haven't already cropped your image. Now, I feel like I have more control by cropping the image myself earlier, so that's why I did that. I cropped all the images before I invoked Negative Lab Pro. But there are methods for using this on the Negative Lab Pro website if you want to look into that. So once that is done, you hit Convert One Negative. It's going to render that out, and ta-da, you have a positive image. Now that we turn the negative into a positive, I think things look pretty good with the default settings with this particular image. This is going to vary image to image. Sometimes you're going to want to change it kind of dramatically, sometimes subtly, sometimes not at all. It's all going to depend on your aesthetic. I do want to mention one thing before we start. If you have the muscle memory to hit Command-Z for undo and Shift-Command-Z for redo, that's not going to work here in the Negative Lab Pro window. You have to use the undo and redo buttons that are right here. So there's no redo shown right here because we haven't done anything yet, but just know that undo and redo are going to be here, and there are no keyboard shortcuts for that. Right at the top, you'll see NLP Standard for settings. And if you were to click on that and come down to Negative Lab Pro, you'll see many options for presets based on different film stocks. Cinestill has its own look. Fuji Superior has its own look, Portra, etc. And things might look great using this default right here, but if you're using gold, maybe you'll want to choose the gold. If you're using Cinestill, maybe Cinestill is going to work for you. You have to go through these things sometimes one by one and see what works best for any particular image. Now, to make this easy on you, I'm going to click out of there, and these arrows right here are going to scroll through the list. So as you go through, you'll see things change pretty dramatically. And if you look down here at exposure, etc., you're going to see these change. Oop, wrong one. See, I'm going to undo that. Now, if you continue through, you're going to see, again, some dramatic changes. Some of these might look fantastic when you click on them, others not so much. That doesn't look very good to my eye. A lot of these, they're just not great. For example, if you go back to Kodak Gold, you might need to, increase the exposure if you want Kodak Gold tones, for example. So I'm just going to continue going back and go back to an LP standard because that's where we were. And this was at 0 originally. So I'm just going to leave it that way. You can do the same thing here with tone profiles. As you can see, there are many different ones to choose from. And again, you can just scroll through these and see what works well for you. And if you'll notice, you'll see up here, there's a little asterisk up here now. And that means you've changed something away from the original defaults. It's not going to save it for the next time. It's only for this particular image. So as we scroll through, you'll see, again, sometimes subtle changes, sometimes dramatic changes. I'm going to go with, let's see, I think we started with lab standard, but highlight or shadow hard looked pretty good too. So I think I'm going to leave it there for shadow hard. You can change any of these aspects right here. I'm going to undo. So it goes back to 0. Soft highs and soft lows can sometimes be pretty useful. These can lower the contrast between highlight and shadow transitions. And I've found that clicking on them sometimes can have a very subtle effect on those areas. I'm not seeing much, if any, change here by activating them, so I'm just going to uncheck them. And you can do the same thing here with white balance. I'm going to scroll through these. And again, you make some pretty dramatic changes. Oh, that's not bad. Auto average isn't bad. Let's see some more here. I'm just going to go back to auto average. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Next, you can change HSL, or hue, saturation, and lightness. Again, more things here. Natural. Let's go to lab. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just going to leave it on lab for this one. Next over here is saturation. You can increase this or decrease this to taste. I'm going to knock that down 1 just because. Sharpness, I leave alone because I might do a little bit of sharpening later. I haven't done a deep dive into how much sharpening is going to affect things here, but I'm more comfortable if I'm going to be sharpening to do that in Lightroom or actually even in Photoshop. When you exit the Negative Lab Pro window, you'll notice the Lightroom profile has changed to Negative Lab whatever version. It started out probably as Adobe Color, but now since you've used Negative Lab Pro, it builds in this custom profile here. Now, if you see black at the edges of your border, you can readjust your crop. And you now have access to all the features in Lightroom, though I do try to make the majority of my adjustments within Negative Lab Pro. It's no big deal if you want to make changes outside of that, but as a negative to positive plugin, it makes sense to me to keep most of my changes within that program. Next, I'll zoom into 100%, probably 200%, and start removing any dust that I see. So I'll bring that up to the corner, and let's bring that back in. And yep, you can see a little bit of the mask there. So I'm going to simply bring that in a touch. And there we go. To remove any dust that got through, I will go over here to the Remove tool and simply click where I see dust. And hopefully there isn't too much. I can change the size, a little bigger or lower. And I sweep through the image, seeing if there's any more dust. There's a little bit there. Since this is at 200%, viewing this at 100%, you're probably not going to be seeing it when you put it on social media, or even when you deliver it to your client. They're probably not going to notice too much. But since I only want to do this once, I am going to sweep through this just to make sure. And I'll go through it like so, and you'll see these little lines. Maybe this is dust, maybe the negative got scratched, but I'll just sweep through like that, and Lightroom will take care of that. sweep from side to side. When there's detail like this in the image, this hides a multitude of sins. So there might actually be some dust in there that I'm not seeing just because there's so much visual information in here. There it is. Sometimes there's some bird poop. We can take that out because no one wants to look at that. If you're in a park and people are walking, there might be cigarette butts on the ground. That's unfortunately something I see fairly regularly. So this would be a good time to remove things like that as well. Also, if there's a blemish on someone's skin, you can retouch that out here. For any larger retouching, though, if I need to remove my assistant or telephone wires or light stands, I might bring this into Photoshop, as I feel like the retouching tools there are a bit more robust than Lightroom's, and sometimes generative fill is the best option for these things. If I want to apply the changes I made to that first image to subsequent images, this next one right here, which was taken right after the first one, the exposure is going to be the same, so the adjustment should be the same. What you're supposed to do is select the first one, shift-click on the second one, and invoke Negative Lab Pro again. Now, you're supposed to be able to, see these two arrows here, you're supposed to be able to scroll to the next one, but I get this error message and I'm not sure why. So this is a bug that I have right now. So I'm not able to scroll from side to side without getting that image, or at least to the next one. And what you're supposed to be able to do is hit sync, and all these settings will sync to the second one. But as you can see, nothing happens. So even if I were to hit apply, nothing's going to happen. So you can do the same thing here, copy from one image, paste to another. Right now it's not working for me, so I have a workaround for this. So what I do is cancel out of that, and I will deselect, and I'm going to select the first one again, and I'm going to copy settings within Lightroom. So this is going to take the profile that was here and whatever was baked into the conversion. And because of treatment and profile, this is the important thing here. Since I haven't made any changes within Lightroom other than cropping and removing dust, none of these other aspects here are going to have any effect on anything I do when I paste. So I'm going to copy, go over to the next image, and paste. And there we go. So the Negative Lab Pro adjustments I made to this first image are identically applied to this one right here, minus any cropping and dust removal. I'm going to quickly go in and check on that. So yeah, there's quite a bit of dust here. So I'm just going to quickly go through and remove that dust. There's a bit more here than there was on the first one. Why that might be, I'm not exactly sure. But it got through, and we'll just take care of it. Now, I made myself a film sharpening preset that uses Lightroom sharpening and noise reduction panels. I also added into that minor changes to a couple of characteristics that add a little extra finesse according to how I like my scan photos. I'm going to click that. So if it's too much or too little, I can use the amount slider here to reduce that effect right there. So maybe 50% looks a little bit better. So like so, and I'm going to undo and redo. So it's subtle, but it's there, and I kind of like this better. If I have more than one photo that's a different take of the same setup, I'll initially cull down to just the keepers and then remove the dust and other unwanted items from just those. I don't see the need to spend time on images I won't be showing or delivering to a client. One final thing to note is that if you use the adjustment sliders in Lightroom with a scanned negative, they'll work opposite of how you'd expect if you were adjusting a positive. Because these are negatives under the hood, numerical adjustments and sliders will work in the opposite direction from normal when working with digital positives. So for example, if you were to take the exposure and if you brought the numbers up, you'd expect it to get brighter, but no, it gets darker because it's a negative. So if you wanted the image to go brighter, you would actually decrease this number. Kind of counterintuitive, but that's how it works with scanned negatives. So as you saw, this isn't a completely comprehensive guide to Negative Lab Pro. Like any program, you use some features more than others, and still others not at all. There are other sliders and tabs and features to experiment with, and I encourage you to do so to find the best feature set and workflow for yourself. The Negative Lab Pro website has a lot of guides and how-tos if you want to do a deep dive into all of its features. They also have instructions for best practices on digital camera scanning and flatbed scanning your negatives to get the most information out of them prior to conversion. That's a good place to start if you're going to use this method. When you start with better captures, you'll get better conversions. At the end of the day, is this a quick process? Not really, but that's also kind of the point. Film photography, by its nature, invites us to slow down, whether it's in determining our exposure, focusing a lens, and here with bringing our negatives to life. It's not about speed. It's about control, intention, and preserving the feeling that inspired us to shoot film in the first place. If you found this video helpful, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this method, or if you have any suggestions or improvements of your own. I'd also like to know what parts of this process you enjoy or dread the most. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you'll be notified when I post more videos. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth K, and I'm here to help.